Good evening. Welcome to Community and Technology, where we connect the global community with news, information, and resources to hopefully help improve your life. I'm Stu Reid. I'm here with my co-host, Dave Burstein. Hey, Dave.
Hello.
Howdy, howdy. So, how we doing? Quite a momentous week this week, huh?
Well,
It's
I
only
thought I'd throw a
Wednesday.
question in your direction.
Okay.
Everybody now has cell phones with cameras.
Mm-hmm.
What difference does that make?
Well, I think it makes a tremendous difference. I think it's transformative. And we've kind of talked about it before, just in terms of how the world is now connected very viscerally with everyone else. And of course, we got a vivid example just this past week with the George Floyd guilty verdict. And the amazing thing, Dave, I mean, it was a gruesome video. I only watched it twice. I couldn't watch it anymore, although it got played many times on the TV. I couldn't watch it. I don't think I even watched all the way through the second time. It just was so infuriating and disgusting to look at it. But be that as it may, it was such an important video. And of course, it was a 17-year-old young woman who just happened to be on the scene, had her phone out, and took that video, and really it changed the outcome of that trial, and not just the trial, but I think possible impact on the consciousness of America. And what really brought that to light, just in a really vivid way, was just yesterday I read the actual official police report, Dave, that was released right after the actual incident, after the death, the evening of George Floyd's murder. And the police report, it was unbelievably vanilla and such a lie.
Wait a
Responding,
minute. Did you say that the Noble Police
responding
Department
to a
lied?
forgery in progress is how it started. And then suspect resisted arrest. Suspect seemed to have medical conditions. Suspect taken to hospital and died at hospital. And that was it. And if it had not been for that cell phone video, that would have been the end of the story. That would have been the official report on the death of George Floyd. And how many times has that happened to Black men and others, across America, where the police just whitewashed what happened, planted drugs, planted weapons, made up stories. And there was no way to counter that except, to try to go to court, and it was your word against the cop. And so often, generally speaking, the cop's word is what was taken as authoritative. But now we've got cameras and cell phones, and everybody's got one. And it really is changing the world, I believe. One of the phrases, Dave, you heard me say this, we have working with residents in public housing, we've helped them put up cameras in their communities that they monitor themselves. Not surveillance cameras, not police cameras, but resident cameras. And the slogan that we came up with that they've adopted is, "We are watching us." And it was a good friend of ours who's now passed away. I think you may remember Hayward Dotson, Rhodes Scholar, basketball player at Columbia back in the day. He was the one working with us, came up with that slogan, "We are watching us." And it just resonates so much with me, with how I perceive what's going on. And back to your question, how has the cell phone camera changed things? Now we are watching us on a global level. And I think it's so significant.
Well, were you surprised what happened to him and what the police officer did?
What happened to Charvin in terms of the verdict?
No, what happened to the guy he killed? Was that surprising that happened?
No, I was not surprised. I mean, I was disgusted. It was so ugly and gruesome, but I was not surprised. I mean,
And
the cops shoot black folks down in cold blood. I guess that the gruesome part was that it took him 9.5 minutes to murder this guy. He murdered him in slow motion. That was the real disgusting. I mean, murder is disgusting no matter how you do it, but that he did it in slow motion over 9 minutes while the guy was pleading for his life, while witnesses were watching, trying to get him to stop what he was doing. It was disgusting, but no, not surprising.
and I like to bring these things home when I actually have some personal experience.
Mm-hmm.
I've been pretty lucky. I've had a couple of encounters with the police in my life, and nothing terrible has come out of them ultimately.
Mm-hmm.
And I never was hurt bad. But what are the police like? Let me tell you two things that happened to me. The first is when I got hit over the head with a nightstick and thrown into a paddy wagon. And ironically, I didn't even happen to be in the demonstration they were busy busting.
Wow.
There was a raucous crowd picketing Hubert Humphrey, and
It's 1968?
1968.
Wow.
They started running from the cops, and the cops ran after them, grabbing them.
Now, were you in Chicago, Dave? Was it at the convention?
Yeah, this was here in New York, thank you.
Okay.
I was in, or just outside, Rockefeller Center skating rink,
Mm-hmm.
where Bob Kennedy was having a staff party. And with the help of some of Bob Kennedy's staffers, a few of us were out there holding signs urging him to run for president.
Mm-hmm.
He was reluctant. Kennedy was not perfect, but he seemed to be coming to the right thing of things at that point. I was happy to be there. I was 16. We actually arranged it ahead of time where we should stand with the Rockefeller Center police. We were there peaceful. They wanted to let the press see some people wanting Kennedy to run. Perfectly ordinary.
Mm-hmm.
And suddenly, people come running after me. One of them was a cop, saw somebody holding a sign when he was chasing demonstrators, literally hit me over the head, probably gave me a concussion, and threw me into a paddy wagon.
Wow.
Now, we were politically connected on that one. In fact, the state assemblyman came down to get us out of jail. But that's the way police often behave.
Mm-hmm.
Another time was much more extreme. I was in the 59th Street subway station, and I saw a cop wrestling a guy at the turnstiles near me. And I did what I usually do when I see a cop doing anything. I stood a distance away and watched, just thinking that maybe people watching would make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
The cop had the guy underneath the turnstile, and he was bashing him in the kidney with his nightstick again and again. And I saw it with my own eyes. This is something I had to believe I was there. After two other cops had came up, I walked up slowly to the officer and asked for his badge number. I was arrested for resisting arrest.
Mm-hmm.
Felony.
Mm-hmm.
The DA insisted on prosecuting it.
Wow.
Well, what I heard, I had a public defender at the first hearing, was that the cop busted his finger beating up on the guy, so that since the cop was hurt, they insisted. Now, that worked out just fine, because while my public defender said they're insisting on holding it for trial, I asked the judge for permission to speak, and I got up and said, I walked up to the policeman after they already had the alleged perpetrator in handcuffs and asked him for his badge number.
Mhm.
That was what I did. And he asked the lawyers to come up, and it was dismissed.
Mhm.
But most people do not see the violence of the police personally. And I haven't seen it. It's twice in a long life.
Mhm.
Other people driving while black see it much more often.
Yep. Yep.
And that's the reality of our world. But let me stop you a minute. I didn't know Hayward Dotson, but since I happened to go to school at the same time he did, and he was the big basketball star,
Yes.
tell me some stories on how he wound up. I
Well,
think he went to law school. Do I remember right?
I'm sorry.
Did he go to law school? Do I
Yes.
remember?
Oh, absolutely. He went to law school at Columbia. He was there when Holder was there, the past Attorney General, Eric Holder, classmate Eric Holder. He a phenomenal scholar. This is a guy, when you asked him a definition of a word, Dave, he would give it to you, the entire dictionary definition. I don't care what the word was. He would give it to, I mean, he once told me that he had read the Oxford Dictionary twice, cover to cover. And that book is like 18 inches thick. I mean, this guy was phenomenal scholar and athlete. As you said, he was on the Columbia University basketball team. This back in 1967, 68, when they were ranked in the top 10 in the country, which at the time was unheard
The
of.
only time in history.
Huh?
The only time in history.
Yeah, the only
Virtually
time, right.
the only time in history the Columbia basketball team had a winning record.
Yeah.
Who was it? Who were his teammates?
Well, there was Jim McMillan.
Is Jim in the pros?
Jim McMillan played in the NBA for about 10, 12 years, very successfully. Hayward got drafted by the Knicks, but got into some kind of dispute with was it Red Albrecht that was the coach?
No, he was Boston.
He was Boston.
Yes.
Who's the guy with the cigar? Red Holtzman. Red Holtzman was the coach of the Knicks. He got into a dispute with Holtzman, and I don't remember all the ins and outs, but he essentially got let go with the Knicks, even though he was drafted. And this is at the same time that Walt Frazier was there and Willis Reed. So he was on that team early on in the season, but then left. He was a Rhodes Scholar. He went to Oxford. He studied over there for a couple of years. He was a phenomenal guy. Came back, had a law career, worked in city government. And then fast forward back in the early 2000s, he started working with me and Doug Frazier and our whole Digital Divide Partners project. And he helped a lot with a lot of the relations, government relations, which he had a lot of experience with, and community relations, because he did a lot of community work. He was a phenomenal guy. And as I said, he's the one that came up with that "We are watching us" slogan that just resonated so much with the tenants. He was something else. He just passed away this past July, and will be sorely missed. He was one of a kind, one of a kind. But while we're talking about the whole
Columbia Alumni Magazine, because most people don't know this story anymore.
Oh, he was, they had a 50-year reunion, Dave, about 2 years ago. What year are we in? When 58, 68, I'm getting fuzzy on my math, but they had the 50-year reunion of I guess it was 2018, of the championship, the Columbia Championship, might have been 2019, of the Columbia Championship. And they had a big event. John Schiller, who had at the time had become the chancellor of the university, he played on the team with Hayward, and a very successful attorney. and he put together this whole event, 50-year anniversary. And I was lucky enough to be invited to the luncheon that they had, along with another classmate who has since left, Zach Huster, who also played on the team. He didn't play on the championship team. He played on the next year team, but he knew all the guys. Went to a big luncheon where Hayward was like the call celeb at the luncheon, and just a real reunion with him and all the guys. And then later that evening, there was a game at the gym, and at halftime they had a big celebration where they gave awards to all the team members, and Hayward got a very special commendation. And I remember I was with him. I actually carried him. Me and Zach took him to the event and back home, and we were with him after the event. And there were about 45 minutes after the event was over, folks just coming over, talking to him, getting his autograph, wanting to take pictures with him. I mean, that's how that's the impact that he made on the Columbia family. It was tremendous. And Jim McMillan, who was his front court mate, had passed away a couple of years earlier, so he wasn't there. His son was there to accept the award on his behalf. So Hayward was the last living member of that duo. And this is referred to at Columbia, the Dotson-McMillan era. That's that whole basketball.
And there was a third player, a very tall one.
Yeah, Bruce. What was his name?
Dave Newmark.
Dave Newmark. Thank you, Dave Newmark. He was the center, 7'2".
Also made who also made the pros.
Yes. Yes.
Never before or since.
Yeah.
There's only one other Columbia sports hero like that.
Yeah, that was an amazing era.
For space.
Yeah.
The Columbia baseball team before he went to the Yankees.
Okay. Yeah. But I just wanted to circle back, Dave. Your original question was, how's the technology of the cell phone changed things? And as we were talking, and you were talking about 1968 and all the demonstrations, of course, I was around at that time too. And I remember back to Columbia again, when we had the demonstrations and the Hamilton Hall takeover, and the police stormed the campus eventually. And I remember how excited everyone was, Dave, to see the footage on TV. They had the film footage on the TV. And that was kind of new, where they had 16 millimeter film technology out taking the news. The guys would run back to the TV station, develop the film, and within an hour or two, it'll be on the air. And that was pretty novel back, and this is the late 60s now. And it really had an impact on how people were viewing what was going on, the fact that they could see it. And similarly, at the same time, footage from the Vietnam War. We had never seen, there was newsreel stuff in World War II, but you didn't really see the grimy details up close on the 6 o'clock news of the war like we did for the Vietnam War. And that really raised consciousness, and I think had a lot to do with the eventual ending of the war, certainly with the whole anti-war movement in the 60s. The fact that folks did see it on the 6 o'clock news day in and day out. And, the technology now is instantaneous, and it's global, and it's decentralized. That's the that's the real transformative piece. You don't need a CBS camera or an NBC cameraman to be on the scene. Miss Frazier, 17-year-old young lady, just happened to be walking by with her cousin on the way to the store, captured that George Floyd murder. And wow, what an impact that video had. And so that recording technology, video technology, and you and I are old enough. We've seen it, as I said, come all the way from 16 millimeter film to videotape to cell phones, and then you have the distribution network, which is the real miracle. of today, the internet, which just transformed the connectivity and the ability of folks to share this information on a global basis and on a real-time basis. So that's pretty amazing.
One of the things that it's done is it allows all of us to be much more informed and feel and know what's going on around the world.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a lot of people have been killed because of Facebook. The New York Times had the stories about the murders of the refugees from Myanmar by mobs put together on Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
There's lots of stories like that. Most of them don't make the Times. There are very high prices we pay for some of what's going on, Donald Trump being one of them, and his people. And I'm going to take the show for a moment and talk about how I've just had a gut reaction to what I'm seeing on Twitter. An acquaintance of mine writes for the Indian newspaper, The Nation. We both cover telecom and occasionally exchange ideas.
Mm-hmm.
I should have canceled my following on Twitter yesterday because he sent out about 30 tweets, all on a related subject. But no, those tweets, I was both glad because it was important to know and pained to receive. Those tweets were from India, where 200,000 people a day are catching COVID, and the real numbers are probably higher than that.
Wow, 200,000 a day?
Yep, that's the US number. India has 4 times our population. We have 50,000.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And the US number is equally horrifying. But India doesn't have the resources we do. We had enough trouble. They had to park a refrigerated truck by St. Luke's Hospital near me to store all the bodies. So we didn't have all the resources. But in India, they ran out of beds and everything else. So the tweets coming from him were retweets of what he was getting of people looking for a hospital bed to which they could take their relative.
Mm-hmm.
It was people looking for oxygen. 21 people died in an Indian hospital when the oxygen failed.
Mm-hmm.
Some huge number, hundreds, have died because they couldn't get into the hospital and get the oxygen, which often is life-saving for somebody with severe COVID. In the US, the death rate, our case rate is still horrifying. And that's with half the population vaccinated. The death rate is still horrifying, but it's half of what it was.
Mm-hmm.
Partly because they do have some care and some treatment, and oxygen is basic. I would have died if I couldn't get oxygen when I had to go in for heart surgery. And of course, I was on a ventilator for a while.
Were you?
Fortunately, I had a triple bypass.
Yeah, I remember. Right, okay.
Yeah, and fortunately, I wasn't conscious for any of that, and it's worked out really well. I just walked 2 miles yesterday.
Excellent.
Which, I don't know if I was able to do that before my operation.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive.
Well, if you have anything that feels like a cardiac symptom, in my case, ironically, it was pain in the left shoulder and left arm, which could have been cardiac, and I went into the ER. 2 days later, I had a triple bypass.
Wow.
So I'm doing well, and they can do incredible things in cardiac surgery, which is what, yeah. But those 30 tweets, which I winced every time I saw his name coming, and I have to check my tweets a lot. There's a lot I do there. It gave me a feeling more than the New York Times ever could.
Wow.
And that's part of the connection around the world.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let's get back to phones and computers and so on.
Okay.
The cost of decent 5G phones is all the way down. I've been telling you that it was going to happen because it happened in China 6 months ago.
Mm-hmm.
T-Mobile is now offering a Motorola phone, nice looking phone, 6.5 inches, 3 cameras, lots of features, for $264,
Whoa.
5G. They've got another one at $299 from Nord. Is it time that if one's interested in buying a phone, they should look at 5G?
Well, I don't know. Certainly, that price point sounds competitive. I know the last phone I got was I think almost $200, and I was just, it was a plain vanilla Android, nothing special. Samsung Android, and almost 200. It was right around $200. So $269, $299. That sounds like it could be a game changer. But I want to throw it back to you. What is the functionality? What is the increased functionality, I should say, of a 5G phone over the 4G phones?
Well, there are two things you can do, or I could do, if I had picked up a 5G phone and was talking to you now. The first thing I could do is I could brag. And people like to brag about their phones.
Yes, they do.
The second thing I could do is I could run a speed test and really impress you. I'd probably get 300 megabits a second download.
Mm-hmm.
There's another bleeding thing you can do with 5G that's practical or matters. There's nothing you would imagine doing on a cell phone today, and probably for years, that you can't do just fine on the 75 megabits you get on a decent 4G phone today.
Mm-hmm.
So 5G still does nothing.
Okay.
There are zero applications out there that make a difference anywhere in the world after 2 years of 5G. Wireless keeps getting better, 4G, 5G, and everything else. And it's going to be more and more important in our life. You're going to be able to shoot the next person being killed in 4K or even in 8K. Samsung has an 8K cell phone camera out there.
Now, Dave, just a sidebar question. What's the advantage of having 3 cameras on a phone? And what is that?
Oh, that's important for a lot of reasons, but I think we have to take a break, and it's a long answer. So why don't you do the break?
Okay.
When we come back, I'll explain to you what's happening in phone cameras. It's wonderful.
Okay, we'll be right back. This is Community and Technology on WHCR 90.3, the voice of Harlem. You're listening to Dave Burstein Harlem with Dave Burstein and Stu Reid.
We're taping this live, but we can't get into the studio, so we're taping it in advance. Hopefully City College will open up and we'll be able to get in there soon.
Yeah, we're hoping that they're thinking that maybe by the fall September semester we'll be able to get back into the studio. I'm certainly looking forward to that.
Well, it's amazing how well people are doing online. The New York, what's the name of the New York Times? Kara Swisher said that there's lots of research that people have been more productive not going into the office.
Yeah.
I wouldn't know. I haven't had an office in 20 years.
Well, I haven't had an office in probably close to 10 years, but I will say that I feel like I've been more productive too, and that I'm not running around, jumping in the car, jumping on the train, going to this destination, that destination to meet this person or that meeting. And so my time management has become much more efficient.
Now, if people have been saying for 50 years that the internet was going to reduce the need to travel, but actually travel has gone up, including business travel. which is very expensive in most cases. People thought that when we had decent video and broadband and offices had good connections, people wouldn't travel as much. It hasn't worked out that way till now.
Mm-hmm.
It probably will in the future. I happen to enjoy going to a lot of the events, talking to people in my business. I learn a lot from people, and it's good to shake their hands. And if it happens to be in Tokyo or Guangzhou or Paris in particular, I'm delighted to travel on business. But I made the decision that after this is over, even though it will be safe, I'm going to cut my travel in half.
Really?
It's good for energy. Yeah, but something that's more important. Every person who arrives in New York on an airplane could be carrying a virus. New York was the world epicenter of the epidemic in around last April. It turns out they're able to trace the different variants of the virus, that we had 3 separate variants, none of which came from China. They all came from Europe. Europe probably got them from China. They have mutated in Europe, probably did, and they were able to track that. So every time you travel, there is a certain, not zero, possibility that you're carrying an infection. And we know, well, most of us don't know how bad that could be. We're looking at 3 million people officially dead on this one. Real numbers probably higher. And if you read the books written by the scientists, we're lucky. If COVID had been as contagious as, say, the flu, numbers would be much higher and it might be happening. So I just think a basic humanity thing is I'm going to avoid taking trips that I don't need to or really want to. It doesn't mean that if I get a chance to go to Paris, I won't take it. And it doesn't mean that Jenny right now is in Denver, where her 97-year-old father is in hospice, and she's been flying to Denver. So I'm not saying you should never take an airplane. But if we reduce it, if all of us cut travel by half, it really does reduce the risk of spreading an infection like this.
Not to mention the carbon footprint.
Absolutely, although very few people in the United States realize that. In England, people were lying down in front of the bulldozers to prevent them expanding the Heathrow Airport. And that's because of the energy. But let me get back to the technology we're dealing with all the time. The issue, we were talking about cameras.
Yeah.
And you asked if the 3 cameras made a difference. The answer is absolutely, and even more so now. The 3 cameras are different cameras. One is high resolution. Another could be wide angle. The third may be close up. So depending on what you need to do, the right camera can do it, and you're going to get a better picture. And how good is that picture? Well, the $200 in China, $300 in the US phones usually have 48 megapixels. You divide that by 12, and you still have 4 megabits. And by dividing it by 12, you can do some sophisticated tricks. Some newer phones, they're still pretty expensive, have 100 megapixels.
Wow.
That's starting to ship and it's going to come there. And what will you do with 48 megapixels or 100 megapixels? There's one answer. It allows you to really blow up and expand. The second answer that they're now making work with it is that you can refocus the shot you take. That software with all that many pixels and that much information can sharpen one area and blur the other, so that you can literally refocus the picture you took after you take it.
After you've
Or
taken it. Is that what you're saying, Dave?
taking it.
Wow.
With that kind of density, you can do all kinds of tricks.
So
Now,
essentially you're changing the depth of field is what you're saying after you take the picture.
absolutely, as though
Wow.
you changed the lens.
So focus
So
on the foreground, focus on the background, focus on the midground, all of that after the picture has been taken.
pretend you're Orson Welles
Wow.
and get all kinds of interesting deep focus.
Wow.
Yeah, that's already working. I haven't done it. Jenny has a field of the camera. We haven't paid. Well, Jenny has 4 professional cameras, including 2 4K video cameras now. A friend was at a business that was closing, and she has incredible equipment, and maybe we'll have a chance to use some of it for the show when we get into the studio. But the reviews I'm seeing, you can't get a really great picture at Jenny's standards or most cell phone cameras, even though the resolution is there, but the lens is too short.
Yes, the lenses. And it sounds like, as you answered my question about why 3 cameras, it sounds like, again, that's a lens issue, that you have 3 different focal length lenses on the cell phone cameras because you can't get an adjustable lens. The lens technology for cell phones is limited.
But even with 3, they're still very short. They're still not very long.
Right.
You know how the lenses on a professional camera can look.
Yes.
And it really makes a difference. So Jenny would say, you just can't do that on the iPhone, no matter what the numbers are, because I need a better lens. That has probably changed. What's happened is that by taking the pictures from the 3 and 4 lenses that you have, putting them together and doing some really amazing tricks in software, you can, I'm told, I haven't done it, I haven't seen anything except selected samples, get the kind of resolution that you get with a $2,000 professional lens.
Wait, hold on there, Dave. Question. Are you saying that a camera with 3 lenses, you can take a picture with all 3 lenses acting simultaneously?
That's what they're doing now.
Wow.
And especially with 4. And we know that works because that's what the sophisticated telescopes do to increase their resolution when they're trying to find a quasar or a black hole. They use multiple sensors and put them all together. That software is now being demonstrated by some of the companies, Asian, of course. Most of the progress in this stuff is now in Asia, for better or worse. And it takes a heck of a lot of processing power. But that M1 chip inside the Apple has 15 billion transistors on it. That little chip inside your phone.
15 billion. Dave, just sidebar. I can remember when transistor radios first came out and they would advertise 7 transistors in the radio. Wow. Billions of transistors?
The top cell phone chips from Apple, Qualcomm, Huawei, Samsung, and MediaTek. What you get if you buy a $600 or more expensive cell phone today. Just in the processor have 15 billion transistors.
Whoa.
A heck of a lot of processing power. And beside that, in the basic processing for the phone, they have a separate neural processor doing things that are usually called artificial intelligence, which can do incredible things on photographs. So that, yes, not merely can you get the different cameras doing different things and better, but now by combining them in software, you can get an even better picture that people involved in it claim is as good as Jenny's $1,000 camera.
Wow.
I haven't seen it, and I'm sure it's not true in some cases. And I know Jenny's going to be shooting with all her lenses for a long time.
Mm.
But that's the answer to what you can do with a lot of cameras. Now, where did that start happening? Multiple cameras and phones.
That's a good question. I mean, maybe in astronomy. I mean, you put a good parallel out there. Is that where it comes from?
Well, you have the long range interferometers with 256 sensors literally across the United States, doing incredible things. But the first to bring the 2-camera technology to phones was Huawei.
Mm-hmm.
For better or worse. Huawei now has a $20 billion a year research and development budget and 105,000 engineers.
Jeez.
That's one of the reasons they're at the top of the world.
Mm-hmm.
Although Qualcomm makes chips just as good as Huawei's high silicon. Ericsson actually makes 5G that's just as good as Huawei's high silicon. They're at the top. They're not better. But there's some things they are better in, or first. And we pay a very high price cutting ourselves off from that kind of progress.
How do we cut ourselves off? Talking about the political firewalls that are being put up?
To go to war against Huawei, nominal for security reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, a lot of it is that Apple is selling more phones this year because we're blockading the chips getting to Huawei. That's another discussion.
Mm-hmm.
But in general, cutting ourselves off from progress elsewhere can hurt. We're also very lucky because if the messenger RNA that is in the 2 best vaccines hadn't worked, and it had never been used before, it's remarkable, the success. It's a Nobel Prize and then some breakthrough. What's in the vaccines we take? Well, if that hadn't worked, China has one of the 3 most advanced vaccines that are an mRNA, and Russia has the second. Johnson & Johnson has, of the 4, the AstraZeneca Oxford. But there was, other than Johnson & Johnson, which came 3 months after the Chinese and Russian vaccines were shipping, and in 3 months, a lot of people were dying, we would have needed the Chinese or the Russian or the British vaccine. And the reason I'm bringing that up here is, beside the fact I'm in the middle of this discussion, I write about companies like Huawei and the Chinese companies who are in a country that there's certainly a lot of things you can say about what their politics are and the nature of the Chinese country, are doing world-class work, sometimes better than us, sometimes learning from us. And Biden's people doing international policy are fools, and there should have been an expletive before the word fools there,
Mm-hmm.
because they're trying to make an even stronger break between the West and China.
Are they?
Yeah. Now, Trump did that, literally blockading any dealings with the leading companies. It's cost American chip companies alone $10 billion that Huawei had to change their purchasing and not buy chips from the United States companies. That big, 10 billion, 1 year.
Mm-hmm.
But that's expanded to a number of others. And a lot of people in Washington, including New York State's liberal Democratic Senator Chuck Schumer, are saying we have to blockade China because of what we think about the Chinese government. China is at the moment a bigger economy than the US by some measures. It's growing 3 or 4 times as fast most years. So it's going to be far beyond us. They're doing more papers in artificial intelligence in the United States. although the United States, and especially Canada, have the best workers by and large. Many of whom were born in Russia or China, incidentally. Google is loaded with Russian engineers now in California. But China's economy is large enough, they don't need us anymore. The economic things that we want to do to China to punish them for what we believe their policies in Hong Kong and against the Uyghurs are going to have no effect. And we're paying a very high price already. And it will just go up as the Chinese scientists and engineers and novelists, perhaps. The Hugo Award went to a Chinese novelist, are blocked. And it's bad policy.
So we're cutting our nose to spite our face, it sounds like, Dave. We're punishing them for political behavior and in fact, cutting ourselves off from scientific and technological development and access to that technology, if I'm hearing you right. Is that accurate?
And it's making no difference ultimately. Huawei's sales went up last year, despite America's blockade, which is probably the strongest action taken against foreign companies since World War II. It's not wars that you don't win and can't win are always a mistake.
Yeah,
as we have found out in Afghanistan. 20 years.
I mean, it goes back a ways. Yep.
Korea.
Yeah. Iraq.
The Chinese basically beat us in Korea. We froze at the old armistice line and left when they agreed to go back to the old armistice line. That was a great moment in Chinese history, a battle that you probably never heard of, and I had never heard of, in 1952, where the Chinese held back the American invasion of North Korea. And the United States at that point decided to give up the war. And in fact, the head of Huawei a year ago said, the United States is attacking us. There's no doubt about that. We must go back to the spirit of that battle in Korea, where the Chinese resisted an American attack. And they care about it that much. So that's what we're up against. It's even if it were the right thing to do, and it probably isn't, it's a terrible mistake because we're going to lose. And it's going to cost Huawei. This year, they're going to be in trouble because they can't make any phones. 2 years from now, or 5 years, because they need to get chips that are made in Taiwan, some of which are using some American equipment. And we told the Taiwanese, you can't do that, and you have to shut down Huawei. You can't make a cell phone chip without equipment at TSMC in Taiwan or Samsung in Korea. Very little of which is actually American. Most sophisticated stuff comes from Holland, in fact.
Really?
And the Japanese make a lot of it. The US has maybe 15% of that market. But we said but every chip making plant has some of that US equipment in it. And we said, no way. And Taiwan went along with that. Doesn't, of course, Huawei $30 billion in sales, $50 billion in sales, which they will pick up in 2 years because they're growing that fast and doing that well in the Chinese. But the other thing that's happening is, what would you do if you were China and the United States cut you off from the most advanced equipment? Or what would the Americans do if the
make it themselves, wouldn't they?
It's going to take a few years to catch up. They're spending $200 billion. Being born in San Jose or San Diego or Chicago does not make you smarter than somebody born in Shanghai or Beijing. Yes, we're ahead. We were there first. We've had a lead. But when it's this strategic, when it's the heart of the industrial economy, the Chinese, of course, are going to do whatever it takes to catch up.
Mm-hmm.
There's one historical example where the Americans were sure the other guy couldn't catch up for a generation. And in fact, we had an enormous lead and by far the best scientists. In 1949, the Soviet Union set off the first atomic bomb, 4 years after the United States had bombed Hiroshima and Nagasaki and showed it was possible. Some of that was spies, but everybody has spies, and I'm sure the Chinese have very good spies now. They just cracked into the US State Department. But once an engineer and a scientist knows it's possible, when you see the bomb or you get the reports of the bomb going off in Hiroshima, you know what's possible, you know what to look for, you know what to plan for. And the Soviets were able to make their own in 4 years. And something like that is going to happen in all the high tech that the US is blockading from China.
Wow.
Again, if it doesn't work, it's not a good idea. Now, you got a question for me to keep the discussion?
You know, the question is, we're about out of time, Dave. We've been having such a lively conversation here about technology on a global level and all the back and forth and jockeying by the giants. Time has slipped away. It's time.
I got some good ones for you next time.
Okay.
Do we do now?
Okay. All right. Well, this has been Community and Technology with Dave Burstein and Stu Reid on WHCR 90.3 FM, the voice of Harlem. Stay tuned next week from 5 to 6 p.m. WHCR, Community and Technology. Thanks for tuning in. Night, Dave.
So long.
Okay.